The massive crystalline ship emerged from hyperspace just beyond Mars' orbit, its translucent hull refracting sunlight in impossible patterns. Earth's early warning systems detected the vessel seconds later, sending military installations worldwide into high alert. Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force stood in the Pentagon's command center, watching as satellite feeds tracked the alien vessel's approach. "All attempts at communication have failed, Admiral," reported Captain Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. "The vessel maintains its course toward Earth, but its weapon systems appear dormant." Chen nodded, her expression betraying none of the tension she felt. 20 years of military service hadn't prepared her for first contact. Nobody was prepared for this. The alien ship halted abruptly at geostationary orbit, positioning itself above the Indian Ocean. For 18 tense minutes, it remained motionless. Then, without warning, a transmission reached every major military and civilian communication system simultaneously. "People of Earth," the message began, translated perfectly into multiple languages. "I am High Commander Lyra of the Kilari Confederation. We come seeking alliance, for we face extinction." Within hours, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. High Commander Lyra, a tall, ethereal being with iridescent skin and flowing robes that seemed to ripple with their own inner light, stood before Earth's leaders. Admiral Chen studied the alien carefully, noting the subtle signs of exhaustion in their posture. "The Drachnid Empire has waged war against us for 112 of your years," Lyra explained, their voice resonating with a musical quality that seemed to bypass normal hearing. "Despite our technological superiority, we face defeat. Our scientists can no longer innovate quickly enough to counter their adaptations. Our tactical computers cannot predict their strategies effectively." "With respect, Commander," Chen interrupted, "if your civilization is centuries ahead of ours, how could we possibly help?" Lyra's expression shifted to something approximating a smile. "Because, Admiral Chen, your species possesses something we lost long ago. The ability to think irrationally, to make impossible leaps of logic, to devise solutions that no artificial tactical system would ever consider." Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing footage of human military history. World War II dogfights, guerrilla warfare tactics, modern cyber warfare techniques. Your species achieves in decades what takes others centuries. You adapt, improvise, overcome challenges in ways that defy our understanding of tactical evolution. The Security Council chambers erupted in murmured discussions. Chen remained silent, analyzing the implications. The Kilari weren't looking for cannon fodder. They were seeking humanity's chaos factor. "The Drachnid Empire approaches your solar system," Lyra continued. "They will not allow another spacefaring race to develop unchecked. Whether you ally with us or not, war is coming to Earth. We offer you our technology, our knowledge, in exchange for your innovative spirit." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "You're asking us to fight a war against an enemy we've never seen, using technology we don't understand." "No," Lyra corrected. "We're asking you to teach us how to fight in ways our enemy cannot predict. Your species thrives on chaos, turns disadvantages into advantages, and succeeds where logic dictates failure should be certain." The next 48 hours were a blur of diplomatic negotiations, military assessments, and heated debates. Earth's nations, for once united by the scale of both threat and opportunity, voted to accept the alliance. 3 months later, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the U.S. Intrepid, Earth's first hybrid warship. Kilari crystalline technology merged with human engineering in ways that made both species scientists scratch their heads in wonder. The vessel embodied the alliance, Kilari power guided by human intuition. "The Drachnid battle fleet has been detected at the edge of the solar system," reported Captain Rodriguez, now serving as her XO. 16 capital ships, approaching in standard combat formation. Chen smiled. The Drachnid were about to learn what happened when you combined advanced alien technology with humanity's talent for unconventional warfare. "Launch our new solar flare drones," she ordered. "Let's show them why picking a fight with Earth was their worst mistake." The war that had lasted over a century was about to change forever because the Drachnid Empire had overlooked one crucial fact. Humans didn't play by anyone's rules but their own. 6 months into the Earth-Kilari alliance, Lieutenant Maya Patel sat in the cockpit of her hybrid fighter, watching the stars streak past at impossible speeds. The crystalline alloy hull of her craft hummed with energy that humanity had only dreamed of harnessing before the Kilari arrived. But it was what she'd done to modify that technology that made her smile. "Phoenix Squadron, maintain formation," she commanded, leading a mixed group of human and Kilari pilots toward their target. "Remember the plan, but be ready to improvise." The Drachnid supply fleet ahead had no idea they were about to become the test subjects for humanity's latest tactical innovation. Maya's engineers had taken the Kilari's elegant shield technology and turned it into something the aliens never intended: a weapon. Drachnid vessels detected, reported her Kilari wingmate. "Telephone, their defense grid is activating according to standard protocols." Maya grinned. "Standard is exactly what we're counting on. Execute Operation Trojan." The squadron split into 3 groups, each approaching the Drachnid fleet from different vectors. The enemy responded exactly as their tactical computers dictated, launching interceptors in a mathematically perfect defensive screen. "They're so predictable," Maya muttered. Now, her fighters' modified shields flared, not to defend, but to project a concentrated burst of energy. The pulse scattered their sensor readings, making each human fighter appear as a dozen different contacts. The Drachnid defense grid, programmed for efficiency, divided its forces to engage each apparent threat. "Their formation is breaking," Tell observed, wonder in their voice. "Such a simple trick, yet our tactical systems never conceived of using shields as sensor countermeasures." Maya's squadron tore through the gaps in the Drachnid defense. "That's because you always think of technology in terms of its intended purpose. Humans, we look at what else it can do." The battle that followed was a testament to how humanity was changing the face of interstellar warfare. Human pilots flew patterns that violated every rule of space combat, using the vacuum's zero gravity in ways that made their Kilari allies question basic physics. They turned their ship's weaknesses into advantages, deliberately taking glancing hits to their shields to use the energy feedback as impromptu weapons. Back on the Kilari flagship Eternal Dawn, High Commander Lyra watched the engagement with growing fascination. Beside her, Admiral Chen monitored the tactical displays. "Your people continue to surprise us," Lyra said. "In all our years of warfare, we never considered using shield harmonics to create phantom signatures." Chen nodded. "It's not just about the technology. It's about mindset. Humans have always had to think creatively to survive. We've never had the luxury of overwhelming technological superiority." The tactical display showed the Drachnid fleet in disarray. Their perfectly coordinated responses, honed over a century of combat with the Kilari, proved useless against human unpredictability. Supply ships were captured intact, their valuable resources and intelligence data secured. "The Drachnid will adapt," Lyra cautioned. "They always have." "Of course they will," Chen agreed. "But that's where humanity excels. We don't just adapt, we revolutionize. Every time they counter one of our tactics, we'll have 3 new ones ready." The success of Operation Trojan marked a turning point in the war. Across the front lines, human innovations began reshaping how the Kilari approached combat. Earth's military historians and strategists pored over centuries of warfare, finding new applications for Kilari technology that its creators had never imagined. In training centers throughout Kilari space, human instructors taught their allies the art of asymmetric warfare. They demonstrated how inferior forces could triumph through creativity and unconventional thinking. Most importantly, they helped the Kilari rediscover something their civilization had lost in its pursuit of technological perfection: intuition. Maya's squadron returned to the Eternal Dawn, their mission a resounding success. As she climbed out of her fighter, she noticed a group of Kilari engineers studying the modifications her team had made to the shield generators. "Impossible," one of them muttered, scanning the apparatus. "The power configuration should have overloaded the entire system." "Yeah," Maya grinned, patting her fighter's crystalline hull. "That's what your simulation said. But sometimes the impossible works anyway. That's kind of our specialty." In her quarters that evening, Admiral Chen reviewed reports from across the warfront. Human Kilari joint operations were showing unprecedented success rates. The Drachnid Empire's methodical expansion had not just been halted, it was being pushed back. Perhaps, she mused, what this war needed wasn't better technology. It needed humanity's greatest weapon, our ability to look at the impossible and say, why not? Captain Marcus Jackson stood in the war room of the Joint Human Kilari Command Center, pointing to a holographic display of the Drachnid's primary shipyard in the Centauri sector. Around him, both human and Kilari officers listened intently, though the latter showed clear signs of skepticism. "It's insane," declared Kilari Fleet Commander Voss, their crystalline features reflecting the hologram's light. "The shipyard's defensive grid has never been breached in 50 years. The energy shields alone require more power than a small sun." "Exactly," Marcus grinned. "And that's why it's going to work. They're so confident in their defenses that they've become predictable. The Drachnid never expect anyone to attack their strongest point." Admiral Chen, watching from the back of the room, hid a smile. In the 8 months since the alliance began, she'd learned to trust when her officers got that particular glint in their eyes. It usually preceded something brilliantly reckless. "Operation Lighthouse," Marcus continued, manipulating the hologram. "We're not going to try to break through their shields. We're going to make their shields work for us." The plan was quintessentially human, taking the Kilari's advanced understanding of energy fields and combining it with tactics inspired by Earth's ancient naval warfare. It was exactly the kind of innovative thinking that had begun turning the tide of the war. 2 days later, a massive fleet of human Kilari vessels propped out of hyperspace near the shipyard. But instead of launching a frontal assault, they began deploying thousands of small, unmanned pods. In the command center of the Drachnid shipyard, Supreme Commander Xar watched the approaching fleet with contempt. "Their force is significantly smaller than our defensive capability. Deploy standard countermeasures." The shipyard's enormous shield grid hummed to life, layers of impenetrable energy forming a perfect defensive sphere. Drachnid gunners targeted the incoming pods, expecting them to be weapons or fighters. They weren't. "Energy spike," a Drachnid sensor operator called out. "The pods are releasing some kind of radiation." Marcus watched from the bridge of the U.S. Defiant as the first phase of Operation Lighthouse unfolded. The pods, inspired by the bioluminescent defense mechanisms of Earth's deep-sea creatures, began releasing precisely calibrated energy pulses. These pulses didn't try to penetrate the Drachnid shields. Instead, they resonated with them, creating a cascading effect that transformed the entire defense grid into one massive refracted energy field. "The shipyard's own shields are now acting as a giant magnifying glass," Marcus explained to his Kilari second officer. "And we're about to give them something to magnify." The next wave of ships moved into position. Modified Kilari cruisers, their normal weapons replaced with concentrated light emission arrays. Technology that would have been woefully inefficient in normal space combat. But this wasn't normal combat. "Fire the solar lances," Marcus ordered. Beams of concentrated light struck the transformed shield grid. The Drachnid's own defensive energy field, now acting as a vast focusing lens, amplified the beams 1,000-fold. The magnified energy pierced through the inner layers of shielding like they weren't there. Inside the shipyard, Supreme Commander Xar watched in horror as their supposedly impenetrable defenses became their undoing. "Impossible. Shut down the shield grid." "We can't, Commander. The resonance pattern is self-sustaining." The Drachnid shipyard, pride of their empire's industrial might, was being systematically carved apart by its own defensive technology, not through brute force, but through an application of physics that no tactical computer would have ever conceived. Beautiful, isn't it? Admiral Chen remarked to Fleet Commander Voss as they watched from the flagship. Turning their greatest strength into a weakness. Sometimes the best way to defeat a wall isn't to break it down, but to make it work for you instead. The Battle of Centauri Shipyard became a turning point in the war, not just for its strategic value, but for what it represented. The Drachnid Empire, for the first time, faced an enemy that didn't just fight differently. They'd redefined what was possible in space warfare. As debris from the shipyard drifted through space, Marcus received a transmission from a Kilari science vessel. They had been analyzing the energy resonance patterns created during the battle. "Captain," the Kilari scientist sounded excited. "The shield harmonics we observed, they shouldn't have worked. According to our physics models, the entire operation should have been impossible." Marcus laughed. "You know what we humans say about the impossible. It just means nobody's been crazy enough to try it yet." The success of Operation Lighthouse sent shockwaves through both allies and enemies. The Drachnid Empire, for the first time in centuries, began to feel something they had forgotten. Fear, not of superior technology or overwhelming force, but of an enemy whose actions they couldn't predict or comprehend. As the fleet regrouped for their next offensive, Admiral Chen received reports of Drachnid forces beginning to withdraw from multiple sectors. The impossible victory had shaken their confidence in their own tactical doctrine. Maybe, she mused, that's humanity's real contribution to this war. Not just winning battles, but showing that the impossible is only impossible until someone decides to prove otherwise. Supreme Overlord Vex of the Drachnid Empire stood before the Imperial War Council, his scaled features illuminated by the harsh light of tactical displays showing their recent defeats. A century of calculated warfare, precise strategies, and technological superiority was unraveling because of one primitive species. The humans do not fight according to any recognizable doctrine. The chief military analyst reported, frustration evident in his tone. Their tactics appear random, even self-destructive, yet they consistently achieve success. Our predictive algorithms are becoming increasingly unreliable. Vex studied the footage from their latest defeat. A small group of human ships had managed to disable an entire Drachnid battle fleet by introducing a computer virus that turned their own targeting systems against them. The humans called it the Hall of Mirrors protocol, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its results. "Show me the Centauri shipyard incident again," Vex commanded. The holographic display shifted, replaying the impossible attack that had destroyed their most fortified installation. "They turned our shields into a weapon. How do we defend against an enemy that uses our own strength against us?" In another sector of space, aboard the human carrier U.S. Prometheus, Lieutenant Maya Patel was teaching a group of Kilari pilots something that centuries of advanced civilization had never prepared them for: improvisation. "Forget everything you know about optimal attack patterns," she instructed, using a simulator to demonstrate. "The moment you become predictable, you become vulnerable. The Drachnid expect perfection. Give them chaos instead." The Kilari pilots watched in fascination as she demonstrated a maneuver that violated at least 3 laws of tactical efficiency. It shouldn't have worked. Yet, in simulation after simulation, it broke through Drachnid defenses. "But the energy expenditure is completely inefficient," one Kilari protested. "The fuel consumption alone." "Sometimes you have to waste resources to win," Maya explained. "The Drachnid can't comprehend why we make seemingly inefficient choices. That's our advantage." Meanwhile, in a secret research facility deep within Drachnid space, their top scientists were reaching a disturbing conclusion. Chief researcher Zax presented his findings to the Imperial Council via secure transmission. "The humans are not simply using advanced technology incorrectly," he explained. "They are fundamentally changing how it works. They introduce random variables, intentional flaws, and imperfect solutions that somehow become more effective than our optimized systems." Aboard the Kilari flagship Eternal Dawn, Admiral Chen and High Commander Lyra reviewed reports from across the front lines. Human innovations were spreading throughout the Kilari fleet, transforming their entire approach to warfare. "Your people have achieved more in months than we managed in decades," Lyra observed, "not through superior technology, but by thinking in ways we have forgotten were possible." Chen nodded, studying a report about a recent battle where human engineers had modified Kilari quantum communications to create false echoes of their ships, a technique inspired by watching old submarine movies. "We've spent our entire history finding ways to overcome superior forces. It's not about having the best technology. It's about using what you have in unexpected ways." The Drachnid Empire was learning this lesson the hard way. Their attempts to adapt to human tactics only made them more vulnerable. When they tried to introduce randomness into their own strategies, their systems literally couldn't compute the inefficiencies, leading to catastrophic failures. "We're winning," Maya told her squadron after another successful raid, "because we understand something the Drachnid don't. Perfection is predictable. Imperfection is unbeatable." Back in the Drachnid War Council, Supreme Overlord Vex faced an unprecedented crisis. Their perfectly ordered empire was being undone by chaos they couldn't control. Reports arrived daily of more systems falling to human-led offensives. "Perhaps," suggested his youngest advisor, earning shocked looks from the others, "we should consider negotiating while we still can." Vex stared at the tactical displays, watching another carefully planned defense crumble before human ingenuity. His empire had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, creating flawless strategies and unbeatable technologies. Now they faced an enemy that turned perfection itself into a weakness. "How do you defeat an enemy," he wondered aloud, "that doesn't try to be perfect?" The answer, as the Drachnid Empire was learning, was that you couldn't. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't superior technology or tactics. It was the recognition that imperfection, adaptation, and chaos were strengths, not weaknesses. As Admiral Chen prepared for the final phase of the war, she reflected on how far they'd come. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as technological primitives, yet they were revolutionizing how advanced civilizations thought about warfare itself. "Sometimes," she told her staff, "the most powerful weapon isn't the most advanced one. It's the one your enemy never expects you to use." The combined human Kilari fleet, assembled at the edge of the Drachnid Empire's core systems, represented the largest military force ever gathered in known space. But Admiral Sarah Chen knew that raw power wouldn't win this final battle. They needed something the enemy would never expect: peace through understanding. "The Drachnid Empire thinks in absolutes," she explained to the assembled commanders. "Victory or defeat, perfection or failure. We're going to show them something different. Adaptation." Captain Marcus Jackson, recently promoted after the Centauri shipyard victory, stepped forward. "Operation Evolution is ready, Admiral. Though I have to admit, it's probably the craziest thing we've ever attempted." The plan was uniquely human in its audacity. Instead of trying to destroy the Drachnid Empire's powerful quantum network that connected their entire civilization, they were going to hack it, not to shut it down, but to make it evolve. Lieutenant Maya Patel led the technical briefing, standing before a hologram of the Drachnid's network architecture. Their entire society is built on the pursuit of perfection. Their quantum network enforces this through rigid protocols and absolute control. But what happens when we introduce controlled chaos into a system that only knows order? The first phase began 3 days later. Modified Kilari ships, their crystalline hulls now housing human-designed quantum processors, approached the outer nodes of the Drachnid network. They didn't attack. They transmitted. In the Drachnid capital, Supreme Overlord Vex watched in confusion as their network began experiencing unprecedented behavior. "What are they doing? This isn't an attack pattern we recognize." "Sir," his chief analyst reported, voice trembling, "they're introducing inefficiencies into our system. But they're productive inefficiencies. The human virus wasn't destroying their network, it was teaching it to think differently. Programs learned to adapt rather than follow rigid protocols. Systems began finding novel solutions instead of following predetermined patterns. Maya watched from her command station as the virus spread. "It's like teaching a machine to dream," she explained to her Kilari counterpart. "We're showing their network that there's strength in imperfection." The effect rippled through Drachnid society. Their ships began responding differently to threats, showing hints of tactical creativity. Their defense systems started adapting in ways their designers never intended. "They're evolving," High Commander Lyra observed, watching the transformation. "Your people aren't just changing how they fight. You're changing who they are." The culmination came at the Battle of the Imperial Core. The human Kilari fleet faced the assembled might of the Drachnid Empire. But instead of the perfect, coordinated attack they expected, the Drachnid ships moved with unprecedented unpredictability. "They're learning," Admiral Chen smiled. Phase 2. Marcus Jackson's task force launched the second stage of Operation Evolution, an offer of peace encoded in the same quantum language the Drachnid network now understood. Not surrender, not victory, but cooperation. In the Imperial Palace, Supreme Overlord Vex experienced something entirely new: uncertainty. The rigid patterns that had governed his civilization for centuries were transforming. And surprisingly, it felt right. "We've spent centuries pursuing perfection," he addressed his council. "These humans have shown us that perfection isn't about being flawless. It's about being able to adapt, to change, to grow." The ceasefire that followed wasn't just an end to hostilities. It was the beginning of a transformation. The Drachnid Empire, guided by their newly evolved quantum network, began exploring the power of controlled chaos. Their society, once rigid and unchanging, started to embrace change. Months later, Admiral Chen stood in the newly established Galactic Council chamber, watching representatives from Earth, the Kilari Confederation, and the reformed Drachnid Empire sign a historic accord. In the end, she told Maya and Marcus, "We didn't win through superior firepower or better technology. We won by showing them a better way to be." Maya nodded, watching a group of human and Drachnid engineers excitedly discussing new hybrid technologies. "We taught them that strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being willing to try, fail, learn, and grow." The war that had lasted over a century ended not with the defeat of an enemy, but with the evolution of understanding. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't their tactics or their technology. It was their fundamental understanding that imperfection, adaptation, and change were not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths to be embraced. As the signing ceremony concluded, Marcus turned to Admiral Chen. "You know, sometimes I think our greatest advantage wasn't our unpredictability or our creativity." "Oh," Chen raised an eyebrow. "What was it then?" "Our humanity itself. Our ability to see beyond winning and losing, to find solutions that make everyone stronger." The stars shone through the council chamber's massive windows, witnessing the beginning of a new era in galactic history. An era where the pursuit of perfection had been replaced by something far more powerful: the endless potential of evolution and growth. To the future, Chen raised her glass in a toast. "May it always be perfectly imperfect."